Today, as we have new participants, particularly from our Facebook page, I'd like to share some thoughts regarding the importance and the benefits of the practice of meditation. Meditation, as many of you know, can be allied or aligned with some religious traditions, but it need not be, because it is a practice that leads to self-understanding, self-awareness, and self-discovery. The key to the meditative practice is awareness, what the Buddhists would call mindfulness, and what Christians would call self-recollectedness. Whenever we are aware, some transformation, small or large, are going on in our lives. When we are aware through the practice of meditation, we will become more sensitive to certain states of tension in the body. For example, when we are unaware, we may find that our arms or shoulders or forehead are tense, and yet we don't notice them. When we go into meditation, we begin to be conscious of these spots of tension, and then by awareness and through normal breathing, you will notice that these tensions begin to fade away and go back to normalcy. As we become more physically relaxed, there is a second benefit to this practice, to this awareness. We will notice that when the body is calm and relaxed, the emotions are similarly calm and more quiet. The two go together. When the body is tense or when the emotions are distressed, then there is a corresponding agitation or discomfort in the other. So, as we go into this inner quiet through the practice of meditation, we'll find that the body becomes more and more habituated to a state of serenity, and then the emotions become more calm. When we do this, day after day, the practice of meditation, week after week, we will gradually notice that there is a change going on in our daily life. You will notice, for example, that as we sustain this quality of inner awareness on our body and our emotions, our relationship with people naturally improves. The reason is simple. Many among us have developed habits of not only stress, but also of irritability, anger, reacting to what others say or do in the form of anger or being hurt. And these are sources of our distress. And whenever we are governed by these, what happens is that we tend to talk back or act in a way that would tend to be hostile towards other people. So when our body and our emotions are more calm on a daily basis, we will find that our relationships begin to improve day by day. Somebody says something nasty to us, we don't immediately react. It is not that we are suppressing the reaction, but there is less or there is no reaction at all. If we see that the other person is irritated or angry with us, we see it. And yet we are not reacting in equal irritation or anger. And hence, our relationships with people begin to improve. And this has an effect not only within our family, but also in our workplace. There are many people who get tense and distressed in the work, and they begin to say things or act in ways that would tend to offend people. And I have known of people who lost their jobs simply because they could not contain their emotions, their emotional reactions to what other people do. So as we practice meditation, we will begin to find these three things undergoing gradual change. But there is something more important other than the physical relaxation state, the emotional calmness, and improvement in relationship. And this is in terms of what is happening in our mind. In our mind, we will notice that we have a lot of thoughts coming in and out. And these thoughts almost always come from the past. If you just sit down, even for 2 or 3 minutes, and watch your thoughts, you will notice that these thoughts are a repetition of the things that have happened 10 minutes ago, 10 hours ago, 10 days ago, or 10 years ago. Things that bother us, and then these thoughts keep on coming back to us because they are unresolved. We are also creatures of habits, not only physical habits, emotional habits, but also mental habits. When we begin to practice meditation, we will begin to notice that our mind and our thoughts may not actually be within our control. Try to be quiet for 2 minutes. Just decide that 2 minutes out of 24 hours, you will just rest your mind and not think about anything at all. And you may find that it is almost impossible. In other words, while we don't want to think about anything, thoughts keep on coming in and out, and we don't even know what thoughts will come when we are quiet. Even though we have decided not to think, but the thoughts think by themselves. In other words, we will notice that thoughts have a habit, a pattern, an activity of its own that is beyond, oftentimes, our own decision-making and our will. We want to think of counting in meditation, but the mind keeps on going elsewhere. When this is the dominant nature of our mind, then we will realize something. We are not in charge of our thoughts. Our thoughts act out of habit, out of past pattern, and not because we want to think that way. When we begin to practice meditation, this becomes more and more clear to us that we are not in control of our thoughts. There is a very serious implication to this realization. If we are not in control of our thoughts, are we in control of our lives? We cannot be in control because whatever we intend to do in a moment, in an hour, in a day, or in 1 year's time, it must pass through our thinking process. I must plan, I must decide to do something, and then I do it. But if my thoughts come from my reactive past, the habitual past, then what I'm going to do today, tomorrow, the next 1 year, will mainly be based on the pattern of my past habits, physical, emotional, and mental. Our destiny, therefore, will become determined by these past habits and patterns, rather than based on our inner decisions. So the effect of meditation is that we become aware of this and we begin to take charge of these habitual thoughts, of these patterns. And when our minds can now attain relative calmness, then we can make certain inner decisions as to what kind of life direction we'd like to take, what kind of thoughts we'd like to think, what kind of activity we'd like to do every day, what kind of reaction we'd like to do when people upset us. In this way, there is an inner decision to go by a certain trajectory, a certain direction in life. And this will now be our new destiny. When we are not aware of our thoughts, our destiny is fixed by the past. When we are aware of our reaction patterns, our thoughts, our intentions, then there is an inner self, an inner consciousness, which begins to take over in planning, in deciding, in directing what we will do today, this month, this year, or 10 years from now. Meditation is therefore so closely linked to daily life. They are not separate. The practice of meditation must harmonize and be integrated with our daily activity. When we do meditation regularly, we will notice that in our daily life, we become more aware of the things that we do, how we react. And so we begin also to take charge of what we do and how we react in daily life, even though we are not in a meditation state. This begins an inner awareness which leads to what we would call the spiritual life. The spiritual life is something which goes beyond thinking. As many of you are aware, in addition to our physical body, our ethereal body, our emotions, our lower mind, and our higher mind, there is something else higher than that. It is what we may call contemplative consciousness, mystical consciousness, spiritual consciousness, Ananda, Buddhi. There are many terms for that, but it is a universal experience for thousands of years that there comes a point when we have transcended these lower levels, we begin to enter into a higher state of consciousness that opens up new faculties, new approaches to living because of the awakening of a higher level of consciousness, which generally is called spirituality. Spirituality is very different from being simply religious. I may believe in this or that, but I may not still be spiritual. On the other hand, a person may have these deep and profound levels of awareness that we would call spiritual, and yet they may not be affiliated with any religions at all. This is the mystical life, and it is the transcendence of our ordinary thinking mind that brings us to these levels. So the practice of meditation has both a very, very practical value in our daily life, as well as being a doorway to our higher life, to the spiritual life. It is for this reason that people are encouraged to try and practice meditation. Now, in doing this, I'd like to just mention a few initial obstacles that people encounter in their decision to practice meditation. They're convinced that meditation is helpful, and yet they will try it one morning and they'll stop the next. They'll try it another week and they'll stop again. Thus, it is not sustained. These are the initial obstacles to the practice of meditation. What can we do in order to overcome this? We, human beings, we are subject to habits. Notice what we do from the moment that we wake up and before breakfast. There are things that we do like a pattern. It is something that is habitual. Then from breakfast to lunchtime, whether you are at work or whether you're at home, you have a certain pattern. And when we don't think about it, these patterns would be continuing. Sometimes, or for some people, it is oftentimes, these habits are counterproductive. They are not very helpful to our growth and development. For example, I may need exercise, but I don't. My mind knows that I must exercise, and yet the body does not follow. There is a conflict between a higher intention and the lower habit. So one of the things that we need to deal with would be, in small steps, try to overcome certain habits until we begin to take charge of all our habits. So in terms of meditation, what can we do? We sit down and then we try to practice meditation. The body begins to become restless, and then it stops. In about 5 minutes, doesn't want to do that anymore and would want to do other things because of the habits. So what can be done is that in small segments, bite size, try to make a decision. For example, all right, I'm going to sit and just watch my breath and do counting, even for just 5 minutes. No matter what happens, 5 minutes. A person may start becoming restless and wants to stop, but you made a decision, 5 minutes, go on with it until you finish 5 minutes. And after that, you can stop if you wish to. The next day, make another decision. Either it is again 5 minutes or 7 minutes, but stick to it. Small incremental improvements, 1 minute by 1 minute. So do 7 minutes or do 10 minutes. Whatever it is, even if, let's say, you feel that the meditation period is a waste of time, it is not really a waste of time. Because by sticking to the 7 minutes or 10 minutes, you are re-educating the personality, the physical, emotional, and mental habits. Keep at it for several days, and you'll find that the body will no longer be complaining in going through 7 minutes or 10 minutes, then go longer, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then you'll find that the body is naturally acceding to this instruction of the mind to stay and be quiet for 20 minutes. In meditation, it is suggested that you practice at least 20 minutes a day. At the beginning, it can be shorter. For children, it can be shorter. So go ahead until the body habituates itself, and then you'll find that after 1, 2, or 3 weeks, the meditation habit will become part of your daily routine. And when you don't do it, you will feel uncomfortable. You feel like there's something that you did not do. So it has become part of your daily routine, and it is something helpful rather than just the habit of sitting down and watching television or doing nothing. So we have to do this initial overcoming of our past habits in the practice of meditation. Later, in our future sessions, we will look into the obstacles about the noise of the mind. But briefly stated, the mind is noisy out of habit in the past. That's the reason why we use a substitute activity, which is attention to the breathing and the counting, as a choice that we make. It doesn't matter what you use. You can use a mantra, you can use a point in the head, so long as it doesn't create tension. So counting is a very easy process, and it is non-religious, not connected with any kind of belief systems. And eventually, this counting method will just be dropped because we won't need it anymore. It is just a tool. It is not meditation itself. It is a tool which we use in order to stabilize our mind. When we are able to do this, then you will notice that there will be changes going on in your life after that. Do not be impatient with it, because we are trying to normalize or undo the habits of 20, 30, 40, or 50 years. It cannot be done in 1 day or even 1 week or even 3 weeks. But generally, when you repeat something in 2 or 3 weeks, then you are habituating the body, the emotions, and the mind. And then you are setting new patterns in your life in accordance with your highest ideals in life. I'll pause here now, and then we will devote to an open forum, a discussion. I'd like to acknowledge the participation of people from many countries, including Tanzania, Africa, Europe, and many countries in Asia. There is a question here, which is, how do we meditate on emptiness? What is called emptiness is understood in many ways by many people. For example, a person may focus on something and suddenly they feel that their mind is blank. But actually, it is a kind of blankness that is not empty. It is full. It is like one that has been hardened and it looks like blank, but it is not. So we need to be aware about the passive blankness and an active and alert emptiness. Emptiness would mean that the consciousness is awake and alert, and there are no thoughts coming and going. Take note that if we observe our mind, you don't have to do it now, you can do it in another time. You just close your eyes and then just watch your mind. And you will notice that thoughts flit by involuntarily, they just come. Then you will see lights and colors in front of your mental eye. Then you will hear chattering in your mind. All these things keep on going. And then we don't use forcible suppression to stop these. No, it won't work eventually. Because what you suppress are just underneath the surface, but it's still there, energized, wanting to be attended to, and hence it will have to come out and bother us again. Rather, let us be aware of these thoughts coming and going, and when they are important, take note of them. We will attend to them after the meditation, and during the meditation, we just let them come and go. Later, maybe after several weeks of practice, you will notice that there will be periods when there are gaps between thoughts, between perceptions. And that gap, there was no thought. And when that gap becomes longer and longer, then we have a state of awareness that is empty of thoughts. But take note that even in that state, it may not yet be fully empty. Because while there seems to be no thoughts flying in front of our consciousness, but take note that there is still a meditator who is actively trying to meditate. That in itself is not emptiness or quiet. And that is the reason why the deepest level of meditation must go into this meditator himself or herself. Who is this one meditating? Who is this one thinking? Who is this? Who am I? Then we go into that. It is one of the most difficult aspects of meditation, and it requires that we first deal with the outer noise of the mind, the emotions, all these thoughts from memories, sensations, and then when it's quiet, we will be able to look now into this other source of activity, and that we would go into the deepest level until truly we go into true emptiness. Here is another question. Is there any damage done when you are suddenly disturbed from outside while you are in deep meditation? No, there is no deep damage done. You will just be startled. It's the same way as if, like right now, we are not meditating. Suddenly there's a very loud sound. Then what happens is that the whole organism, the body, the emotions, will react in a way of defensiveness. Our level of tension will rise up. Then what we should do is that we must be aware of this level of tension. And then as we watch, you will notice that this level of tension, the energy in it, will slowly fade away and go back to a state of normalcy. Non-meditators will notice that whenever we are startled, it takes us quite some time before our emotions and our mind goes into a state of quiet. It may take 1 minute, 10 minutes, or whole morning. But it will be noticed that when we have practiced meditation for a long time, then when we are startled and this disturbance rises up, then very quickly, in a matter of seconds or a few minutes, it goes down immediately. Zen meditators have been tested for this, and they found that this is one basic difference between those who are long-time meditators and those who are not. Here is another question. In some meditation groups, we are asked to adopt a certain hand position. Does hand position matter? In a deeper sense, it doesn't matter, because the hand position, the breathing, the postures are just preparatory stages that will prevent disturbances from the physical body. The reason why people would put their hands like this or put their fingers like this is in order to help the chi or prana to circulate throughout the body continuously, harmoniously. Meditation itself is about the consciousness. The body must be quiet. There must be no agitation or disturbance. And then we can stay now with our consciousness. So long as the body can be relaxed, the breathing calm and smooth, then your posture, your hand position would be secondary. The flow of prana can disturb us. That's the reason why whenever we are doing irregular breathing, like that, you will notice that the mind cannot be still, because the breathing agitates what is called the chitta, or the mind stuff of our consciousness. And therefore, in meditation, we don't do deep breathing. The breathing is normal, and when we are very calm and quiet, you'll notice that the breathing becomes very, very light, that it almost disappears. When the brain and the mind is very quiet and rested, then we don't consume a lot of our physical energy. The brain is only about 3% of the body weight, and yet it consumes 1/4 of the body energy. So when the brain is quiet, then we don't need so much energy or oxygen in order to sustain ourselves. What if just being aware on my breath works better for me rather than counting 1 and 2? I learned this in Vipassana 11-day retreat on mindfulness. It is all right, whatever is working. Take note that there are many approaches. Just take note of 2 things. Our consciousness usually can do 2 activities at the same time. The first one is the visual, and the second is auditory. Suppose you focus your mind somewhere here, or the breathing. You keep on following the breathing, follow it. You may notice that while you're able to follow this breathing, or a point in the forehead or on the nose, there is an involuntary chattering in the mind. Some of you may remember that you may have heard a song yesterday, and today that song keeps on coming back in your mind involuntarily. You're doing something else, and yet that song keeps on coming back. So in trying to do awareness of the breathing and then the counting, then you're attending to both. But in case just by being aware of your breathing, you're aware of the chattering of the mind, then it's okay. In Vipassana, there are actually 4 levels of awareness. The first is sensory. Then we go up higher the feelings, and the highest is awareness of our own consciousness itself. So what is important is awareness, being aware of the contents of our consciousness so that it can become quiet. Awareness of sensation, awareness of counting, awareness of breathing, these are simply tools which later we must let go of, because that's not the purpose of meditation. Another question, in regard to your last week's explanation on the peripheral awareness, I suddenly noticed that while I was watching my breath or my mind while meditating, there is constantly an unattached consciousness watching all the time. How do we extend this awareness to our daily lives? Yes, this is what we mentioned before regarding peripheral awareness. When we do meditation, our ordinary sphere of consciousness, let's say, is this much. As we do meditation, you will notice that it begins to expand. That's what we often hear, expansion of consciousness. It expands. This expanded state of consciousness would make us become aware of our body, our emotions, our reactions, our thoughts, whereas before, when the sphere of attention is small, we don't notice these things. Then it expands. After we finish meditation, after 5 minutes, this expanded state will begin to shrink back to the usual state. And then we go back again to the usual reactive pattern of the mind. But as you do it again tomorrow, and then the consciousness expands and then shrinks back, the next day expands and shrinks back, you will notice that it doesn't shrink back to the original level. Something is left such that when it shrinks back, there is something added now to our peripheral awareness in daily life, such that you will notice that even when you are working, when you are talking with people, as you are saying, there is this other unattached consciousness that is there. This is the remnant of the peripheral awareness that was expanded during meditation and left and sustained during daily life. And as you keep on meditating, this peripheral awareness will grow larger and larger, such that we become more conscious of what used to be in our subconscious, in our subliminal state. Things that we don't notice, now we notice. When we are tense, when we are irritated, when we are angry, we immediately notice it, whereas before, we are carried away by them. Another question, I always wondered about that. I myself, on my solo meditation, do not use a hand position. Thanks for clarifying. Then another question. Can meditation be successful if we do not practice all the 8 limbs of Patanjali's yoga? Okay. This is an important question, and which actually deserves a longer treatment. But let me just focus on certain essential points. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he outlined 8 stages in the practice of yoga or meditation until one attains to the cessation of the movements of the mind, which is the purpose of yoga and which is samadhi. And these 8 stages contain also some details. Now, what is important is that in the 7 stages, the main purpose is to prepare us for true quietness. And therefore, whatever will prevent the disturbance should be part of the preparation. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, to the best of my knowledge, is probably the most comprehensive treatise or writing about how to prepare ourselves for the quiet and meditative mind. It covers virtually all aspects, all sources of disturbance. It starts with yama and niyama. Yama means things that we should not try to do. Niyama are things which we should try to observe. Then we go into pranayama. the regulation of breathing so that it doesn't disturb and produce thoughts. Then we have the asanas, or the posture, which is just simply that it is stable and will not cause disturbance or pain or discomfort in us. Then we go to the next, which is pratyahara, which is that, when you are sitting in meditation, there will be sounds around you. Maybe sometimes the body feels itchy and so on. These are sensory perception. There will come a point that we can make a decision to just be aware inwardly without being disturbed by this sensory perception. Is this something similar to suppression? It is not. Right now, if you're listening to what we are discussing, perhaps there were sounds around you which happened. Your ear heard it, and yet your mind did not entertain it. You just decided to focus on something. When you're reading a book, somebody may pass through in front of you, and you don't even notice that there was somebody who passed, but your eyes saw it, but your mind did not perceive it, did not entertain it. So pratyahara, or sense withdrawal, is such an action. And then after that, we go now into this taming of the mind, which is the concentration, dharana, and then meditation proper. So now, in these preparatory stages, the 7 preparatory stages, they are, to the best of my understanding, highly practical. Let's go back to yama. Yama consists of 5 things. One of them is truthfulness. In other words, non-lying. We will notice that whenever we lie, it is something that disturbs us. I am afraid of something. I don't want to let you know about something, and so I have to lie about it and then keep it to myself. That state makes me hold on to a state of lie, and then that one is something which makes the mind uncomfortable. And so whenever we go into quiet, these incongruities, incongruity between what is truth and what we just told people about, these incongruities would come back and bother us. And therefore, it is best that we are able to live a life wherein which we don't go and lie to other people. Some may say that this is impossible. I know that it's very difficult. And in the seminar we conduct in the Theosophical Society, called the Self-Transformation Seminar, we go into this in detail. Look into small things that we tend to lie about. And then when we learn first about our fears of consequences and how to communicate without hurting or offending people, we may find that we can begin to tell truth in daily life to our spouse, to our parents, to our children. In other words, it's possible to not lie at all first in the family. If we can do this, we can move out into our work, our social life, and we may begin to find that it is possible to be more and more consistent in the way we think and the way we say and the way we act. This is integrity because it integrates our actions, feelings, our thoughts, and our words. At the beginning, it may look very difficult, and yet it is the key to peace of mind. So maybe later we will devote a bit more time to many of the limbs of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It is just a small book, and yet it is extremely deep and rich. And I would encourage people to go and study the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali because it is, so to say, one of the most systematic or scientific among all the treatises on meditation and the spiritual life. Other questions? And the TS, we had attended the 7 courses in Lodge in Singapore, but we didn't go through with the subscription. Can we proceed with our affiliation in Philippines? Yes, you are welcome to take part in any of our activities, in any of the correspondence courses that we do in the Philippine section, it's open to all. So you're most welcome. So here is another question. Sometimes during my meditation, I would juggle between counting and focusing on my breath in just one sitting. Is that all right? Breathing is natural. It is automatic. And so we don't even have to attend to it. It is just that we harmonize the counting with the breathing. If you have been taught a mantra and you have been using it for many years and it works for you, go ahead and use a mantra. Or maybe your mantra is just one single syllable, then do it in your out breath. You will notice that when you count, you don't even notice the breathing anymore. It's just a counting, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. After you mentally say 1, there is a gap in your consciousness before you go into the 2. And after you say 2, there is a gap in your consciousness before you say 1. This gap is a gap of silence. At first, it will be very short. When there is this gap, sometimes thoughts would jump in. But go ahead and go on with the 1 and 2. Then this gap will become longer and longer, and you will notice that the mind becomes more and more quiet. Later, you may even notice that the counting fades away without you noticing it, and yet you're still completely aware and alert. Then just stay there. You don't even have to bring back the counting. Later in your meditation, you may find that when you sit down, you don't even need a counting. The mind becomes quiet almost immediately. But if you interrupt your meditation for many days or weeks and go back to meditation, you'll find that the mind is noisy again. Then you can go back to the counting. Experiment with it, because there is no hard and fast rule. There are just guidelines. You have to observe your mind and understand why these approaches are being used, and then you'll find when they will be useful and when you can forgo them. Another question. In the past meditation sessions that you led, you usually had Om sounds thrice or more. Why not now? It is because we are using the internet, and the microphone and sound system may not be that good when it comes to you. I have asked some people about it because the first time when we did this meditation, I used Om. And then some said that it was sometimes choppy and so on. So later, I used the bell sound. And today, I use the bowl sound. The bowl, which when you strike or when you move a piece of wood around it, it creates a resonant sound. So that's what I'm using today. And whichever works, it's okay. If intoning the Om would be helpful, we can do that sometime in the future. Another question, with regard to your explanation on emptiness, so the highest state of emptiness is non-awareness of the knower. Yes, a state of non-duality, a state of transcendence between the knower and the object known, between the thinker and the thought that is being produced by the mind. And here is a very difficult state, because this self is something which has been built for lives. And then suddenly you will let go of it. It doesn't want to let go of immediately. So it takes a lot of non-attachment, true non-attachment, and not just during meditation, but in daily life. Whenever we are attached to things, the consciousness, this sense of self, doesn't want to disappear because of its attachments to existence, attachment to people, attachment to ideas and other things. So this area is something which you might wish to explore more deeply. And there are a few works which you may wish to look into. I would suggest, for example, the works of Krishnamurti. He probes deeply into this question about the thinker and the thought. Then also the teachings of the famous enlightened yogi Ramana Maharshi, who teaches the approach of vichara or self-inquiry, the meditation using who am I? Another question, which one is the better to be focused on as thought keeps coming at the same time we breathe in and out? Yet I know conscious attention is just only one point. The purpose of the breathing awareness, awareness of sensation, the counting or the mantra, is to stay on one point that we have decided on. Whatever it is, you choose what you'd like to stay on, you're able to stay with it. When you can do this, you don't need the crutches, the tools anymore. But while we still are unable to do this, then they are very useful tools. If, for example, as you're doing the 1 and 2, 1 and 2, you find that the mind is still very disturbed. You can't even stay in 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Then I would suggest something temporarily. It is counting from 1 to 50 or even 100. When you breathe in, count 1. When you breathe out, count 1. When you breathe in, count 1. When you breathe out, count 2. Breathe in, count 1. Breathe out, count 3. The breathe out, you keep on counting 3, 4, 5, up to 50. And they go back to 1. This is helpful because now you are focusing on the counting. And if you forget you are in number 16 and you have lost the counting, just go back to 1. Later, when you find that the mind is now more stable, you can go back to 1 and 2 until there comes a point when you don't even need 1 and 2 anymore. How long can meditation aid you towards forgiveness? In dealing with forgiveness, I would like to add something prior to meditation. The need to forgive is when we have been hurt or we are angry towards certain people. And this hurt has been embedded and suppressed within us for a long time. And when we do meditation, when we are quiet, sometimes this hurt is not even touched. It is just there, lying undisturbed. And when we finish meditation, it was very quiet, and yet this hurt still remains there. In the seminar that we conduct in the Theosophical Society, called the Self-Transformation Seminar, we deal with this directly. So for example, you are hurt, you have been hurt, insulted, offended by Mr. X. And whenever you think of Mr. X, you really feel tense and you feel angry. Your heart throbs, your head becomes warm, and your fingers or your hand becomes tight. Take note that this is the opportunity to let this anger energy congestion flow. But you have to go through it with awareness. When you think of Mr. X and your heart is thumping and maybe you feel a heaviness on your chest, then feel it as you breathe in and feel your arms and legs as you breathe out. You're not pushing it away, just being aware. And then you will notice that this congested energy on your chest will begin to spread and flow to your hands or your mouth or your throat. Allow it to be so. And when you do so, you may find that your hands may be tingling, pins and needles, or even numb. When the anger is very strong and it's flowing, then your hands may even become so stiff that you cannot even move your fingertips. It's all right. Do not panic, do not be afraid. Just continue doing this, because when your hands begin to get numb, it means that it is working and it is flowing away. After some minutes, the numbness will disappear. But you will notice something else, that the heaviness on your chest, the tightness on your chest has diminished or even disappeared. You may have to do this several cycles. And after that, when you think of Mr. X, this heaviness on your chest, the tightness of your fingers may no longer be there. Then you can now go deeper into this when you are meditating. In your state of quiet, you think of Mr. X, and you may find you no longer hate the person, you have no anger towards the person anymore. Then wish him peace, wish him joy, wish him fulfillment and happiness. Then you are at peace with Mr. X. You don't even have to forgive him because it's no longer an issue with you. There's a question here. This may be off topic. He says, is it true that the chanting in a certain group purify the mind and burn some karma? When we are chanting anything, whether we are doing the rosary, prayer, or chanting, we are setting the mind in a certain state which is more conducive towards equanimity, holiness. If you repeat, for example, a certain uplifting prayer or chant with certain words that will uplift your mind, then you are filling your mind with those kinds of thoughts. And in that way, you're actually helping change the mind. Can it burn karma? I'll just share my opinion. My opinion is that it will change our karmic future, but it will not burn past karma. Let me explain what I mean by this. If yesterday I hurt somebody, maybe I ruined his computer permanently. It cannot be repaired anymore. Can I undo that? No more. Because the broken computer or watch or cell phone is completely broken, irreparable already. No matter what kind of chanting I do, no matter what kind of prayer I'll do, this broken computer will not just magically come up to become a full computer. It will not. But the owner of this computer is you, and you're angry or hurt by this action of mine. And so, what can I do today in order to change the karmic effects of what I did yesterday? First, I apologize to you. Second, I'll try to see whether I can repair the computer. If not, I compensate you for it. In other words, what I do now, how I deal with you, will now change and modify the effect of the karma yesterday. I add something, this is called the present karma, out of the three kinds of karma. The present karma combines with the karma of yesterday, and the new result is different from if I didn't do anything. If I just broke your computer and run away and don't even want to apologize to you, then you will feel angry with me for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or 10 years. And if you have the opportunity, you may want to strike back at me out of that anger. And that will be the karma of the action yesterday. So what is important is not to go back in time to prevent that thing which already happened. It is not. What is important is that we do something today in order to modify the past karma, and then the new resultant karma will become different. Another question. Can you tell us more about mantras? Is any word a mantra? Mantra has two functions. The first function is, as we have explained it in meditation, it is just a word that we use as a tool in order to make the mind stable. Just like 1 and 2, 1 and 2, some people would say, hang so, which means I am that. Some Christian meditations would use Jesus. The word itself may inspire something which is uplifting. So, but the purpose when we do it in meditation is that the mind will become quiet eventually and the mantra must go. Eventually, if we keep on staying with a mantra, it becomes an obstacle because the purpose of meditation is inner quietness. So this is the role of mantra in meditation. But there is another aspect in mantra, and it is that there are certain sounds, there are certain syllables, which when intoned has a certain effect on our mind, our emotions, and our organism. And it is believed that there are people who have developed or have discovered certain tones, certain pitches, certain syllables, that when it is intoned, it has a certain effect in our minds and feelings and organism. For example, the word Om, when it is intoned, it inclines towards inner calmness and peacefulness. But if I use a word that has a negative connotation, that has a noisy sound, and has a very high pitch, then it agitates me rather than calms me. And so this is the other aspect of mantra. The very design of the syllable, the tone, the way it is intoned, produces a certain effect on the mind, oneself, and other people. And this is a bit different from the function of mantra in meditation. There's a question, is there such a thing as meditating too much? Yes, I'd say there is. The purpose of life is not to sit and meditate for 24 hours. The purpose of life is to live. To live is to relate to people, to survive, and look for some means of sustaining oneself, having a job, contributing to the peace and harmony of society, the happiness of people, having a mission to make this world a better place. When we do meditation, there may be some time when we may have to do it for a longer time. In a retreat, for example, one may meditate for 12 hours in one day. There are only 24 hours and 8 hours of sleeping, and then you spend 12 hours a day meditating. For a period during certain retreat, it will be very helpful because it deepens our awareness of our deeper layers of consciousness. But if we spend the rest of our life just trying to go into there, then we may begin to ask, for what purpose? Is it just to go in there and be quiet? What's the difference between that and sleeping? I'm not yet talking about spiritual states. I'm just talking about the practice itself, because in the spiritual state, the meditative mind may go on throughout the day, even when we are talking, eating, working, and so on. So I'm not talking about that. That one is what sometimes referred to as the practice of the presence. And it can go on while you are engaged in your work, in the way that you relate to people. But in meditating, when we are busy people, then devote a certain number of minutes or even hours, a day or a week, in order to come back to a kind of oasis, such that when you go out into the world and be active again, there is this other meditative consciousness that goes with it. And then it begins to transform the way that we live. Another question. What is the place of hallucination and delusions in our mental life? Why do these mental aberrations happen? Can meditation aggravate them? We have two layers of our consciousness. One is the higher, starting from our higher mental to the spiritual. The other is the lower, from our lower mental going down to our emotions, our subconscious, and so on. Things like hallucinations, delusions, neurosis, and so on belong to the lower. And we must be able to deal with them in a practical way. And when we try to do meditation without attending to them, we may find that there will be incongruity between our personal life and the meditative life. When these things are not attended to, like neurosis, then during quiet period, they may begin to emerge. And hence, it may lead to psychological issues or difficulties. So what I would suggest is that if there are experiences of hallucinatory things, delusions, which is actually sometimes a major phase of neurosis, it's going into psychosis, like for example, schizophrenia, then we may have to deal with this first before we go into meditation. Meditation will help if it's done properly in relation to these states. I'm not saying that that it will be harmful, it will not aggravate. However, when the person is not able to integrate this with a state of quiet, then it may not be helpful. I would suggest that such a person be referred to somebody who can guide the individual in relation to these states of mind and the meditative practice. What do we do when accounting becomes mechanical and the mind wanders off? Then go back to the counting. It's the mechanicalness that will keep you going back, and then when it goes away, it gives you the cue that you are no longer alert and attentive. Just go back to it. When you're alert and attentive, you'll find that it doesn't go away anymore, but eventually it fades. The counting fades and you don't need it anymore. Then stay in that silence. So now we will close our session for today. Hopefully you'll find that our discussions and practice itself would deepen your own experience of meditation and make a gradual transformation in your daily life. So thank you everyone, and see you next week.